I mentioned on a previous video that your location is not necessarily automatically indicative of your ethnicity. I used the example of Ireland. For example, I said if a person from England or Scotland, lowland Scotland, of Anglo-Saxon origin, travels to Ireland and moves there and lives there, it doesn't automatically make them ethnically Irish. And I use that example because it's easy to understand. But the truth is that the more relevant application would be that of migrants from Africa and the Middle East. Say that if somebody from the Middle East, particularly a Muslim culture, was to move to Ireland, they're not automatically ethnically Irish, even if they move there and live there. That is very true. That was my statement on a previous video. But there's also such a thing as balance, which is to say, yes, your location doesn't automatically define your ethnicity, but neither does your genetics. Now, I'm not saying your genetics and your bloodline are completely irrelevant, because they're not. But I'm saying that that doesn't automatically define you as part of a thing or not. Neither does your location. So, to use that example, there are two extremes. Say a white person from the United States whose ancestors have lived in the United States for some 350 years. They say, well, I'm of Irish descent. It's like, okay, but you're not ethnically Irish at all. The other extreme would be somebody from Arabia who moves to Ireland and refuses to assimilate. And you would say that person is also not ethnically Irish at all. So those are two extremes of the issue, but they're both true. Neither your location nor your blood DNA automatically defines your ethnicity. The truth is somewhere in the middle. So it would be somebody who is ethnically Irish, means they're of biological, traditional Irish descent, and lives in an Irish community. That would be an Irish person. And could be also, they could have more than just that ancestry. They could be black or brown, provided that they have traditional Irish descent to some significant degree, and that they live in an Irish community and practice that culture. So that's not the answer anybody was looking for. Because on one hand, you have people say, well, to be Irish is a matter of DNA. So it would be all the white people in the United States who have been there for some 400 years. They say, well, they're Irish too. And the truth is they're not. Because it doesn't matter what's represented in their DNA. They haven't been members of an Irish community in some 400 years. And the inverse of that would be to say, well, an Arab who moved to Ireland yesterday refuses to be part of the culture is also not Irish at all. Just because he lives there doesn't automatically make him part of that situation. So the truth is somewhere in the middle. Truth would be ethnicity is a construct that combines biological descent with language and culture in a multi-generational sense. So it's not automatically defined by location, and it's not automatically defined by blood either. Not only. It does require blood, but it's not solely defined by it. And that is the issue. The issue, I use Ireland as an example because it's easy for people to understand. Because there are hundreds and thousands of white Americans who are absolutely not Irish, who have Irish bloodline. But they're not ethnically Irish because they don't grow up in an Irish community. They don't have that culture. And the last time that their ancestor did was some 300 and some years ago. And that's what I'm getting at. There's a balance. Just because a non-ethnic Irish moves to Ireland doesn't make them ethnic Irish. And just because a non-ethnic Irish has biological descent from people who left that community some 300 and some years ago does not make them ethnically Irish. It absolutely does not. Because ethnicity is not defined by location, and it's not automatically defined by blood, although it does require it. So the truth of the matter is that a black-skinned individual in Ireland who is of the Irish Gaelic culture and has the bloodline from the white Irishman to some degree is definitely more Irish than a white American with Irish descent. But an Arab who moves to Ireland and has no Irish blood and refuses to assimilate is obviously not Irish. And I use that example because it's easy for us all to understand. It's an easy description. The location is the location. The ethnicity is the ethnicity. The bloodline is the bloodline. The ethnicity requires the bloodline, but the bloodline by itself does not equal the ethnicity. It has to be combined with community, culture, and language, and tradition. And that's really the only thing I could say. Yes, ethnicity is not defined by location, but it is defined by community and culture and blood, but not solely by blood. Because basically the best way to make it understandable is to say if a white American who has significant Irish blood has not been in an Irish community for some 350 years is obviously less Irish than a person in Ireland who has only a partial amount of Irish blood. And a person who moved to Ireland and has no Irish blood is also not Irish. So the truth is that the balance is somewhere in the middle. Just having bloodline does not make you part of the culture. Absolutely not. And just moving to a place does not make you part of a culture either. Absolutely not. It has to be a combination of blood, community, culture, and tradition, and language. That's what defines an ethnic group or an ethnicity. So people need to understand location is not your ethnicity, as I went over in a previous video. But neither is bloodline, although your ethnicity does require a certain bloodline. That's not its sole defining factor. Point being, a brown or black-skinned Irish person who is of biological Irish descent to some degree is still plenty more Irish than an American who is white and has a lot of Irish descent because they're part of the culture, the community, and they have the blood. So that goes for everyone. The vast majority, the vast majority of people, could be defined by the same standard. I'm just using Ireland as a template because people can understand it. There's a lot of Americans who say, well, I'm of Irish descent. But that's different than actually being part of an Irish cultural community. And there's also a difference between those who are simply migrants in Ireland, who are not Irish. And I'm just using that as a template because it's easy for people to understand. Having a significant Irish bloodline does not make you Irish. Conversely, simply migrating to Ireland also does not make you Irish. It takes a combination of bloodline to some degree, mixed with language, culture, community, and tradition. And all those things together combine and make an ethnic people. So that's what people need to understand. It's that way for almost every group. I just use Ireland as a template because it's easy for people to understand. They say some 20%, 21, 22% of all citizens of EU countries have ancestors who are from more than one EU country. That's not counting migrants. I'm not speaking of migrants in that statistic. The statistic is 21 to 22% of citizens of EU countries have ancestors from an EU country other than the one they're citizens of to some degree. And so the truth is that there's a population flux there to some degree. So to say that an individual who lives in Ireland, who is of some Irish descent, and is part of the culture and the community and speaks the language, is less Irish than a white person from America who doesn't have any of that, is very racist. Because you're basing it solely off of skin color, and not off of culture, community, and ethnicity. It's also fucked up to say that a migrant can move to Ireland and be just as Irish as those of Irish descent. So the truth lies in the middle. And that's applicable to all of us, in truth. Ethnicity is not solely defined by bloodline, although it requires it. And it's absolutely not defined by location. But it is defined by community, culture, and tradition and language. So that's what people need to understand. I'm not beating up on anybody. I'm just using that as an example. I'm really not beating up on anybody. I'm just saying that that's an example. It's an easy template to understand. That if somebody who is American and is white and has a lot of Irish DNA that has not been in an Irish community for some several hundred years is obviously less Irish than a person in Ireland who has less Irish DNA than them, but has some. And it's also true that a migrant to Ireland who has no Irish ancestry is obviously not Irish. And that's true for everywhere in the world. I'm just explaining it. I'm using that one as a template because it is easy to understand. The location doesn't give you an ethnicity or a culture. But simply having blood doesn't give you an ethnicity or a culture either. It has to be both. You have to have a functional community with an ethnic culture and language and tradition combined with biological descent to some degree, but it doesn't have to be any more or less than the others. And that's what folks don't understand. Well, sensible folks understand, but a lot of people don't. Most people understand, but a lot of people do not. Like I said, some 22% of people in the EU, citizens of EU countries, have ancestry from more than one EU country, which means to say that a person from Switzerland could have French ancestry, right? Just to give you an example. So they could be a citizen of one country, but they could have a father or a grandfather or a great-grandfather who was a citizen of a different country, which would mean they're ethnically, whichever one that they are culturally part of. But that's the point. They would still be somebody from somewhere else in the world could be like, well, I have more Swiss ancestry than them. It's like, no, you don't, because they're part of the culture. And you're just white. Does that make sense? And I'm really not beating up on anybody. I'm just explaining it. There's population fluidity between European countries. The same is true elsewhere. But it depends on the culture. But still. So it's wrong to say, this is just for the sake of example, it's wrong to say that an American with a significant amount of Irish DNA is, quote, more Irish or just as Irish as a dark-skinned person who's only of Irish ancestry in part, who is part of the Irish culture and lives there. Conceptually. I'm not saying that that is a commonality, but I'm saying conceptually, think about that. A white American with 300 years removed Irish DNA is obviously not as Irish as a dark-skinned Irish person who has some Irish DNA because they're from the community and they're part of the culture. I'm saying conceptually, consider that. So ethnicity is not location, but it's also not solely defined by biological descent, although it does require it. That's all I can really say. People are stupid, but you make me spell it out. Ethnicity is a combination of bloodline, language, tradition, culture, and community. It's not defined by location, and it can't be solely defined by bloodline, although it requires it. I don't believe in so-and-so identifies as something that they're not actually part of. That's not acceptable. But I also don't believe that location can automatically, magically give you a new ethnicity. So the truth lies somewhere in the middle. You have to be part of the community, and you have to have its blood. But simply having its blood doesn't make you part of it. You have to actually be like from there and grow up in it, or grow up in the community to some degree, even if not the location. So I think I've said my piece. Location is not ethnicity, but neither is blood. Although ethnicity requires blood.